Hey, my friend, welcome to Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. Today, it's story time. We are talking to Tracy Dawson, who wrote the very awesome book, Let Me Be Frank, a book about women who dress like men to do shit they weren't supposed to do. Besides being an author, Tracy is also a TV writer and an award-winning actress. So according to her bio, one of her awards was for a sitcom in which she played opposite Jason Priestley, who was totally my celebrity crush in the 90210 era. And I like to think that Jason and I just got a little closer because I got to interview Tracy. Like, what if Jason's like, oh, I wonder what my old friend Tracy's up to. And he Googles her and he finds this podcast. And then he's like, whoa, that interviewer sure seems really cool. That could totally happen now. Okay, but back to how cool Tracy is. She got to act in everything from like the Shaw Festival to playing a villain on a Disney Halloween movie, which is all kinds of actor goals, really. And as a TV writer, she won the Emerging TV Writer Award and has written jokes for Richard Dreyfuss and Ed Begley Jr., who called her a genius. Let Me Be Frank is her first book, and dudes, it is so good. Sit back and listen to stories of women from the 1300s to today who put on a pair of pants and did some outrageous shit. You might be surprised at how relevant their stories are today.
Breaking news. Your dream life isn't going to happen because you made a vision board. You're going to need goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. This podcast is about getting clarity on what you want, having the grit to do the actual work, and most importantly, constantly training your brain to be your bitch. Ready to be inspired? Here is your host, best-selling author, Una Duncan.
Hello, Tracy. I loved your book. It is so entertaining, so fun. I learned so much and it was so inspiring. I especially loved your 21st century commentary on all these historical stories. Because I think you do sometimes, you'll go into a Wikipedia of like Joan of Arc or whatever and be like, damn, wow, she was pretty badass. But to have someone do some framing for you as you're reading, it's like watching a great movie with a funny friend. So I really enjoyed it so much.
Thank you so much. That's definitely, my goal was to invite the reader in with me, and that I don't want to hold these women or these stories or history in general at arm's length. You know what I mean? Like it is personal. These things apply nowadays, even if the dressing is different. Ha ha ha. No pun intended.
Well, I want to ask you about the applications for today, but first, what got you interested in this subject enough to write a book?
Yes. Well, so as I mentioned in the intro to the book, because I did want to make it clear, like this wasn't just some like, hey, this would be fun to write a book. I mean, obviously it was fun to write a book, but it came from a very personal place, which is, about 10 years ago when I was starting out as a TV writer in Los Angeles, you go out on all these interviews, right? Like, because they're trying to get all the executives to get to know you. They read your material. They ask you to read their new shows. And then you go in and you meet with them and they say like, hey, so which of our new shows do you think, you'd be a good fit for? What are you gravitating towards? And then I told this one particular executive, oh, well, I like this, and this. Here's why I think I'd be a good fit. And this executive, who happened to be a woman, said, oh, well, none of the shows that you just mentioned have any female needs. And I sort of I think I must have turned like 50 Shades of Red and felt like so mortified and like ashamed and gross. Like I felt so many things in that moment because I had never thought of myself as a specialty item. Like as a writer, I write jokes. I'm great at dialogue. I know what my strengths are. And I think I'm pretty great. You know what I mean? So for someone to say like, oh, we've already hired 2 women on those shows, so we can't hire, like there's jobs available, but they are not for you because you have boobs or whatever. And so I was just, that really freaked me out. I went home. My shame sort of turned into rage, as you can imagine. And I fantasized about, being like Dustin Hoffman and Tootsie, disguising myself as a dude so I could just write some jokes. You know what I mean? Like I just want a job, guys. And so I sort of funneled that energy into different writing projects and scripts that I was working on at the time. And then years later, I saw this piece in Jezebel where a woman had sent out the first 10 pages of her book, and her proposal with her real female name, and she got a pretty dismal response. She sent it out again with the male name, the exact same submission, and she got a much better response. And I just went, wait a second. Like, so something that had happened to me a few years earlier was still like sort of swirling in my brain. And I started to go like, I wonder how many women through the ages took on a male disguise or a male name just to do what they wanted to do with their lives, just to like write a book, write on a TV show, or like, you know, obviously way, way back in history. I actually never thought that I would find enough women. I really didn't think when I started doing the research, I thought, well, there's not going to be enough stuff here to fill. You know, originally, I don't know if you knew this, Una, but originally this was a TV idea. So I thought maybe this could be like an anthology show with a great hook. And I came up with the title.
I love your title.
So the book is Let Me Be Frank, a book about women who dressed like men to do shit they weren't supposed to do. So originally, this is an idea I had for a TV anthology show. Those are notoriously hard to sell because they're expensive with different periods and stuff like that. So when I didn't set that show up, I couldn't let go. I had done all this research. I'd found all these women, more than I ever thought that I would find. And so I actually just on a lark thought, I wonder if this is a book. And it's a real lesson that things can come out of failure or rejection. You know what I mean? Like that you can actually take that energy and turn it. And also, I didn't take it too seriously because I'd never thought about writing a book before. I think that's another lesson I learned from it was like, you can actually just go, I wonder if I should try this. And you could just try it. And guess what? From the moment I said, I wonder if this is a book to when we sold it to HarperCollins, it was 4 months, which is insane.
Wow. That is insane.
It was really, really fast. And I'm very grateful.
I love those two lessons that you talked about, how from rejection can come unforeseen success. Like you can take that rejection and turn it into something. And I also love how you said, you know, when you didn't take it too seriously, and I can absolutely relate to that. Every kind of big leap forward I've had in my life has usually come from me being like, I'll just try doing this weird thing, and with zero attachment to it because it wasn't my big identity. You know, I'll try being a fitness instructor. And I thought that was like such an eye-rolly joke. And little did I know that was going to turn into my life, or writing a play or whatever. All these things were just I don't know, let's just try this thing and see if it's fun or not.
Absolutely. I think that that is something that I want to bring forward with me because it all worked so effortlessly. The book and finding the illustrator, the book is filled with art. I had this dream of what the art would be like, that it would be by a painter whose work I would want to hang on my wall. And then we found her. And then she said yes. And so it was this beautiful, organic ease to it. And flow. That's how I felt. And so it felt, you know, blessed. It sounds a little woo-woo, but you like woo-woo stuff, right?
I do. Yes, I do.
So it felt a little woo-woo, and it felt like all the women were with me. It felt like every day I woke up to sit at my desk and to work. I felt like a sisterhood with all these people, many of whom are dead, long dead, you know? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Let's hear about some of these women. Can you start with Hannah Snell, the patron saint of the dumped but undaunted?
A name I came up with. This was not her official title. So Hannah Snell, you know, it's the 1700s, a time when, you know, women relied on men for basically everything. They would take care of the home, have babies, whatever. But they were financially reliant on the men. And her husband up and left while she was very pregnant, Hannah Snell, and she gave birth by herself. And then, as is often the case in that time period, the baby did not survive. And so there she was, you know, probably, I don't know, grief-stricken, pissed off. And she decided she was going to go find her husband. And she found out that he joined the military. So as I say in the book, it's not like she was like, oh, he joined the military, I guess that's that. She was like, no, I'll join the military. So she disguised herself as a man. She got the clothes. I mean, very, very bold, very resourceful. I love this woman because her story basically shows she's like many women in this book, the queens of pivoting. You know what I mean? And that's what I feel about my life. My life is filled with pivoting, just like back what we were just saying about being rejected, having failure, right? She took that energy and she joined the military in order to find this, you know, philandering husband. She finds out he was sentenced to death and he was died. She didn't go back to what her previous life was. She was like, I'm good at being a soldier. So she stayed being a soldier. Also, by the way, it goes back to the finances. So she was like, I'm financially solvent. I'm protected. I have freedom of movement, something you didn't have as a woman back then. And she enjoyed, the musket drills and the fighting and stuff. And she was good at it. So after the army, she then joined the Royal Marines. She was involved in some incredible battles. She got shot in the groin with a musket at one point, but she didn't want the medic to discover her female genitalia. So she dug out the muskets out of her own groin. And from all documentation, she was a badass. And then one night in 1750, she decided to come clean to her fellow soldiers, and they supported her. Like, they were supportive because they'd seen her badassery, and they encouraged her to apply for a pension, and she got the pension.
As a female.
Yeah, exactly. They said, you served and you deserve to be recognized. And her resting place is a military hospital cemetery, which was her last wish. And yes, she did spend her final years in a sanitarium. This is something that we'll get into maybe later about how there are a handful of people in the book who end up in like institutions or whatever. It's obviously really hard to know what the framework of that is in terms of even mental health. You know what I mean? But we can circle back. Let's circle back to that mental health convo later.
Let's do it.
So yeah, that's Hannah Snell.
I mean, just amazing. I love the Hannah Snell story. And there was another story, I believe, of someone who just trumped off to war as a man. She wanted to be a war correspondent, and they were like, there's no way we're letting a woman do that job.
Yes. She didn't want to be a soldier. She definitely wanted to be a journalist. And so this is the First World War. She went over there in 1915. Her name is Dorothy Lawrence. I love Dorothy Lawrence because she just wanted to be a journalist, and she was just like, let me go report on the war. They laughed in her face in London. They were like, are you joking? Get out of our face, you little girl. She was 19 years old. She took her bike and she put it on the ferry across the English Channel to France. And then she started to just bike around France and get to know locals and sort of see what was going on. And she soon realized, if I'm going to get to the front lines to report on this, I'm obviously not going to be able to do it as a woman. And she befriended some boys from back home, some English soldiers. They snuck her the makings of a uniform. They helped forge her an ID. She cut off her hair. She wrapped herself in cotton padding to sort of try to disguise her curves and stuff. And she made it to the front. She made it. And before I tell more of her story, I just want to say she did write a book about this. And I read it cover to cover on Google Books. It's called Sapper Dorothy Lawrence. I totally recommend it because she's funny. I relate to her because she went after what she wanted. People thought she was crazy. The book was not a success, Una. They definitely labeled her like a freak of nature and like, why did you do this? As a female ambition was such a crazy idea, but I love that she did it. She went after it. And I love that in her book, she sort of has these self-deprecating jokes. But anyway, she ended up getting to the front. She was a sapper. That means she dug mines and they filled them with explosives and then they blow it up to try to make headway on the
trenches?
Whatever you call that. Yeah. Trench warfare. Yeah. Okay. So after she was there about 10 days, she confessed her identity to someone because she was like having fainting spells. They probably weren't eating very well. Like maybe she had her period. Who knows what the circumstances are? But they ended up taking her and thinking that she was a spy or something called a camp follower, which is a super chill way of saying prostitute, trying to make some extra dough from the soldiers, which is crazy. And she was just interrogated a million times and sent from place to place to place. They shut her up in a convent with some cloistered nuns for a while. And they sort of banned her from writing anything until after the armistice. So when the war was over, she was free to write her book. And like I said, it wasn't a success. It's such a bummer. It's such a bummer that her story couldn't have been like, oh my God, you're amazing. You did that. Don't you think that that's like, I feel like that's how it would be seen today. But in that time, they decided to rake her over the coals and give her shitty reviews and make fun of her. And again, she ended up in an institution.
Well, I mean, I want to ask you about that. So yeah, a lot of them end up in institutions. So do you think that that is just society's revenge on them not playing their roles? Or do you think that you do have to have a little bit of mental instability to take such extremes to get what you want?
these are just my opinions, right? But like what we know about mental health now versus what we knew then, my gut isn't saying like this is revenge and it's just like lock those ladies up. But when it came to mental health and things that were in the vein of hysteria, that was definitely considered more of a female affliction. And if they didn't understand what a woman was going through mental health wise, you know, it was maybe easiest to lock them up, right? So I think that there's people in the book who experience trauma. So it's like, yeah, there's all kinds of aspects we don't know about. And there certainly is a history of being like, oh, you're a difficult woman, like we'll lock you up. But I personally don't see a link between, oh, you're going to take these measures and disguise yourself as a man to get what you want and mental illness. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the point I guess I want to make. Yeah.
I like it. That's a great point. Hey, quick break to announce the winner of November's podcast contest winner. As you know, every month I'm giving an awesome prize to the person who leaves the most wonderful review for this podcast. And the winner is So Z. That's S with 5 O's, Z-E. And he or she says, I love the positive messages and actionable tips in this podcast. Lots of variety and fun to listen to. Congrats, So Z. DM me on Instagram and let me know whether you'd like a copy of my book, my habits tracker, or full admission to my upcoming 28-day transformation program. And just a quick note, I've recently had 3 people ask me how to leave a review. So if that's you, first of all, thank you so much for trying. Secondly, I don't blame you. It is not very intuitive. So first of all, you can only leave a written review on iTunes, not Spotify. If you're listening to the show on iTunes, what you've got to do is you got to click the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner and then click Go to Show. And then you scroll about halfway down and then you should see ratings and reviews. And underneath the last review, you'll see a little thing that says write a review. So if you do that, you could be next month's winner and have a special place in my heart as well. Back to the show. Speaking of mental illness, you address a little bit about Joan of Arc. Tell me if I have this right or not, Tracy. People have dismissed Joan of Arc as just having had schizophrenia.
Yes, certainly there's some scholarship that's just like, you know, she was mentally ill or da-da-da-da-da. And if you think about who is in charge of writing history, it's old white men, right? And so it's just like the way that her story would have been documented or the way it would have been framed, the context that it would have been given. It doesn't surprise me that there's a lot of scholarship over the years that would say, oh, well, she was just crazy. And when you really read what she accomplished, what she did, it's too much of a coincidence. Everything just lined up perfectly. No, she achieved that. She did that. I want people to read, because I think people think they know about Joan of Arc. I am trying to reframe it to say one of the main charges against her was dressing in men's clothing. It wasn't just about her saying that she heard voices. Like you could say, oh, she was crazy. She's schizophrenic. You could also say divine intervention. You could also say that she had, I don't want to say psychic connections, but like intuition, like female intuition. You know, you could say that she was gifted. You could say that she had some weird gift for military planning that no one can understand. And usually when you can't understand something and it's a woman in history, people aren't going to say, oh, well, she was a genius.
Right. Napoleon is a genius. You know, Joan of Arc is crazy.
Yeah. And so I wanted to reframe her story. I wanted to point out that she said that she was going to take off the men's clothing and that she would stop talking to her angels. And they were like, great, you know, you're going to live in jail then, as opposed to, you know, you're going to burn at the stake. And she put her male clothing back on to protect herself from being raped in the prison, because she was in a prison with all these men and male guards and everything like that. So she was just trying to protect herself. Again, with a lot of these stories, we're piecing together all kinds of details. And so we're never going to actually know the full story. But it's important for people to rethink something like the Joan of Arc story, or like, why the framing of mental illness, right? Why so prevalent with women? And to question some of the stuff that we all learned in school. Question who wrote those books? Why are those the books? Why is that the curriculum? Well, there's people in charge for eons, and those people are all old white guys.
There's a lot of people that listen to this podcast who have fitness and sporting goals. Tell us about some of the people who had to pretend to be men in order to participate in athletic endeavors. Hey, dude, if you are enjoying this episode and you have a friend that you think might also benefit from this information, please share it with them. That helps my podcast so much, and it's going to help your friend. Share the love. Thanks so much.
A handful of people in the book are maybe we've heard of, like, oh, Joan of Arc or Catherine Switzer, who was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon. I tried to write those chapters in like new, fresh ways that sort of reframes the story. But then there's people like Rena Rusty Kanakogi, who most people have never heard of. And she literally changed the world. Like, she changed women's sports as we know it. She changed the Olympics. And it all started from this thing that happened to her when she was 24 in like Queens, New York. So she was born in 1935. Rena Rusty Kanakogi. She was born Rena Glickman. That was her birth name. And she was a troubled kid. And she was getting into fights. And she had all this energy. And she was bigger than everybody else. She was just like a really large, big, tough girl. And then a neighborhood friend introduced her to judo in the 50s. And she could put all of her energy into this. And she just took to it like a duck to water. And she was excellent. Now, there was nowhere for a young woman to train, let alone compete. So she had to join this all-male team, right? That's who she trained with. And she was as big or bigger than these guys. So it worked for her and she became amazing. Okay, so the time comes, 1959, for her to participate in this YMCA tournament. She cuts off her hair, she tapes down her breasts, and she says, I'm going to compete. The coaches famously told her, don't draw any attention to yourself. Just don't be too good. Well, she could not tamp down her greatness. She triumphed. She won. She goes up to receive her medal. And I guess they were suspicious and they said, are you a girl? And she admitted she was a girl. And they stripped her of her medal right then and there. And that injustice, that moment, basically set off. She said this many years later in the New York Times, that it was that moment of injustice that sort of like set her advocacy and her activism and her whole life's work in motion, because her whole life became about, first of all, bringing judo to as many people, boys, girls, everybody, children. Like, she really loved kids and working with kids, but she wanted it to be equal, but also she wanted to amplify women's judo. And she got into screaming matches over the years with the Olympic Committee. She remortgaged her house in order to fund the first women's judo championship at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Amazing.
Yeah.
And she basically dedicated her life to this sport and to like raising up women's judo. Well, guess what? In 1988, she threatened to sue the Olympic Committee. She said, you're prejudiced. This is bias. This isn't right. And in 1988, women's judo made it into the Olympics for the first time, and she was the coach. So just think about that. This moment, like we said at the top of this discussion, rejection, failure, right? Being stripped of this medal. Well, she takes that energy and she goes, no one should have to experience what I just experienced. That is bullshit. And she literally got women's judo into the Olympics. I just love her so much. I love her so much. She passed away, and in 2009, 50 years after she was stripped of that medal, 3 months before she died, the YMCA re-awarded her the medal. So they made it right before she passed away. They made it right. And, you know, I want to yell about her from the rooftops. Do you know what I mean? Like, when you hear a story like that, you're just like, yes.
Yeah. Everyone needs to know about that. That's awesome. Can you tell us about the Iranian women who snuck into the soccer games?
Yes. So one of the things that I was blown away when I was doing my research, because I thought, like, I wonder if there are more modern stories. Well, I was pleasantly surprised, but also, like, you know,
Bummed.
It's like, it's one of those things where you're like, this is a bummer that people are still having to just to get a job, go to school, play a sport, or in this case, watch a sport, just to watch their favorite sport. Football, aka soccer, is huge in Iran. And there are diehard female fans and they want to support their team, but girls and women are not supposed to attend stadium games. They're not allowed in. Even though it's not an official rule of the state or anything, it's like this unwritten rule. And there have been cases where if you were caught, you could get a slap on the wrist. And there's cases that are much more severe and you'd be locked up. And just massive oppression. So when I discovered that there were these young girls who watched YouTube videos and bought wigs to teach themselves how to put on makeup and facial hair and put their wigs on so they could disguise themselves as boys, just so they could go and watch their team, I was so blown away because, like, if the line keeps moving about what the punishment is going to be if you're found out, that's incredibly brave. And the thing that I learned in my research about Iranian women is they are defiant and they are strong. And there's a lot to be learned from these incredible women. And I just felt such love and such warmth towards these girls who just want to watch a sport.
So what happened to those women? Because I'm assuming if you know about it, then the people of Iran know about it, that they were sneaking in. What happened there?
So I learned about them originally from a BBC.com article, and it went viral, but it was after the fact. So they obviously got in. They got in, they took pictures, they were doing videos, they were celebrating their team and stuff. And I don't think anything happened to them after the fact. Perhaps their names were not, I'm sure their identity was kept secret. And also they were wearing their disguises.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have to say, it's really cute when you see the pictures because, like, man, those are some janky beards, man, that they were gluing to their faces. But I love them. And I can't believe the bravery, to be honest, because it's like, that's scary.
So I think that whenever we think about women who dress as men in order to have access to opportunities, you're like, well, that's unquestionably a very brave person, a hero who's paving the way for other women. But you tell some stories about some women who maybe weren't such heroes. Can you tell us about the witch pricker?
Oh my gosh. Well, I thought it was important. I mean, in my work as a TV writer and the characters that I like to develop, the stories that I like to tell, I think that feminism means and equality means the ability to also be like bad, to make bad choices, to be villains, to be anti-heroines, not just anti-heroes. You know, there's more than Tony Soprano and Walter White. I want to see women in these roles too, right? So then when I discovered the witch pricker, I was like, first of all, horrified. The whole time period of the witch hunts is absolutely, I had to lie down as I was researching that chapter because it's heavy stuff, man. And especially when the vast majority of these thousands upon thousands of people who were murdered, not just burned at the stake, they died in many horrific ways. The vast majority, of course, were women. So this particular woman, Christian Caudle, probably saw what was going on. Again, you're piecing together the history from these various accounts and you have to fill in some blanks, right? So you just imagine she witnesses this practice. There's many different ways that they would try to find out a witch. So one of them that I didn't know about until I researched this book was witch pricking, which is, it's just crazy. I apologize to anyone who hasn't heard about it. I'm about to tell you. So long needles plunged into the body at certain points, looking for what they called the devil's mark. And the idea would be, and it's crazy. It's just everything about this is just crazy. So that's the foundation, you know, the way that they decided, the scientific ways that they decided to try to find if you were a witch or not. But the idea is if you didn't feel pain or if you didn't bleed, then you were a witch or something like that. So Christian Caudle sees this practice. And, oh, by the way, the practice wasn't just, hey, come over here and we're going to stick you with a needle. They would pull you out into public. They'd make you strip. They'd shave your head. I mean, it already seems like you've decided that I'm pretty bad if you're doing this to me. You know what I mean? Like public humiliation. It's horrifying. And so, but they made a good living. These witch prickers, these witch hunters. So my guess is that Christian was like, hey, I could do that. I could put on a full black garb and wear a tall hat and I could make some money. And as I say in the chapter, to me, even though it's villainous, what she did, it's sort of like, you know, she's the original Aunt Lydia from Handmaid's Tale. It's not good what she did, right? But I can't help but always try to look at the other side and like the reasoning and that she was a woman of that time and it must have been horrifying. So self-preservation has got to have been in this story. And I'm not saying that makes it right. I'm just saying I like to examine or at least ponder the idea that, well, she must have thought if I'm doing the pricking, I won't get pricked, so to speak.
Yeah.
But she was found out and I guess she sort of accused the wrong person, someone who was really well connected in the court system or something. And then they didn't murder her, which I was really surprised. The story goes that they sent her off to, Barbados or some fever-ridden island where you're supposed to like work off the rest of your days in some work camp situation. Again, we're piecing together snippets from different tellings, but I felt it just was important, just like the same with the pirates chapter, to say that women were not all just heroes and sweet and nice and always doing the right thing.
This podcast is made possible by Fit Feels Good, my online fitness and nutrition company. Here's what we do.
I have so many incredible benefits from the MFA program. It literally changed my life. I have the book, Healthy AF. I'm absolutely in love with my life now. I find that the healthy habits that I built are amazing to go back to. The benefits that you're going to see as a woman in your 40s plus are things you could have never imagined. The key, which I know Una talks about over and over again, is loving your body now, not what you're envisioning it to be.
Hey, if you're liking this episode and you want to make sure you don't miss the next one, you can sign up at unaduncan.com/podcast, and I'll be sure to keep you in the loop. Okay, back to the podcast. Can you tell us about the pirates?
Okay, so these two women both wildly ended up on the same pirate ship, Calico Jack's ship, disguised as men. Like, it was just like a wild coincidence. They didn't know each other before, and then all of a sudden they ended up on the same pirate ship. Interestingly enough, they both started when they were little. Both of their families or parents disguised them as little boys for self-interest reasons, for money that they were getting from relatives. And it's like incredible. One was born in Ireland, one was England, and that they both had these parents that were like, yeah, we're going to dress you as a boy because it's going to financially benefit us. Well, I mean, that just tells you about the time. It was just like, you'll get money if it's a boy. You can send the boy off to do little jobs. You can't send a little girl off to do jobs. And so that is how they both started their lives. Then they both end up disguising themselves as men to be pirates. And they end up on this pirate ship. And they were supposedly just incredible fighters, just filthy mouths. They were so good at being pirates and they fought so well and they were really brave and tough. Yeah. So 1750 was like the end of the golden age of piracy. And the big wild tale goes that they were surrounded and that Mary and Anne were the last ones that wanted to give up. And they were in this battle with guns, and they ended up all being arrested and found guilty and sentenced to hang, meaning all the dudes on board and Anne and Mary. And what they ended up doing was something back then called pleading the belly, which means you can't hang me, I'm pregnant. And they were both given stays. They weren't going to be executed.
And they weren't pregnant, were they? They pled the belly, but neither of them were actually pregnant?
What I read is that they were found to be pregnant. To me, I read that, I put it in the book, but I question, is it for real? They both happen to be pregnant? Like, what are the odds that they would both be pregnant? So again, I take certain things with a grain of salt. So then Mary dies of fever while she's in prison, while they're waiting. And Anne apparently gets out. Some say that her dad came because she came from money, but then when her mother died, she went off the rails and just wanted to start gallivanting and drinking and hanging out with pirates. And her dad disowned her. He was like, get out of here. And then she was just like, I'm out of here. And he was just like, you're dead to me. So one of the main stories goes that he was really well-to-do. He was a Charleston, upstanding citizen, businessman, and that he came and got her and brought her back to Charleston. I mean, I think I read it on an official Charleston website that they claimed her. So I thought that was really interesting. But you see conflicting stories all the time. Died, she didn't die. She escaped. Her dad came and got her. Especially when you're writing historical nonfiction or historical fiction even, you have to sort of sometimes fill in little blanks, right?
In all of your research, and the breadth of the stories that you tell is unbelievable. But did you notice any common themes? Like in this podcast, we talk about goals and having that determination to make something happen, which obviously a lot of these women did. And we talk about grit, overcoming obstacles, which obviously a lot of these women very much did. What are some big lessons that these women have for us?
So one of the things that's a theme that you see come up again and again in the book is this idea of freedom of movement, and that dressing as a man gives you not only freedom of movement in your body. So you're not wearing corsets, you're not wearing tight lacings, your hair is not piled on your head. So there's the freedom of actually moving your body.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the freedom of movement in society. It's like both of those things are so profound that the men of those eras would have taken it all for granted, whereas the women would realize this is equality. It's literally just the ability to move your body how you want to move your body, to dress your body so that you can have freedom of movement. I mean, in terms of grit and determination and goals, it's like really every single person. Some goals are maybe a little bit more upstanding than others. Even the pirates, it's like if they just wanted freedom, right? So they were just like, well, in order to do what I want to do, move where I want to go, gallivant, steal, have sex, whatever, then this is the guise that I have to take. So I think the whole book is goals and grit, if I'm honest.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. And what you're saying there about the freedom to physically move, it reminds me of one of my first interviews was with Danielle Friedman, who wrote Let's Get Physical, A History of Women in Exercise. I don't know if you haven't read it. It's fantastic. But she talks about how historically women couldn't move because of how they were expected to dress and have their hair. Even as late as the 60s, you were supposed to be wearing a girdle and you couldn't breathe that well. And you were supposed to get your hair set once a week. And then you don't let anything mess it up. These are limitations that women have always had on them. Yes. As recently as the 60s, 70s, we weren't allowed to move.
As I say in my book, it was the 60s. When I did some research, I realized that there were rules on the books that stayed for a long time in the 60s in Chicago and probably many other states. I just read about this particular one in Chicago where if you were wearing pants, if you were wearing trousers with a zipper fly in the front, that was considered male trousers. And if the zipper was in the back, then they were female trousers. And if you were gay, and back then they were raiding the gay bars and they were looking for any way to control women and queer people, right? That was just the MO. And so what they do is they would raid these lesbian clubs and they would come with their flashlights and shine them onto their crotch to see, is there a zipper there? Right. Or is there not a zipper there? Because if there was a zipper there, they were allowed under the law to pull them away in the wagon. And because the law on the books was you're impersonating a gender opposite to your own. That's the 60s. And they would run to the back of the clubs. I've watched this documentary and the old lesbians were like, we'd run to the back of the clubs and we'd take our pants off and switch them so that the zipper was in the back and they couldn't arrest us. But yeah, the freedom of movement is really central to one of the stories in the book, Dr. Mary Edwards Walker. She's the only woman to win the Medal of Freedom. She's the second woman to graduate medical school in America. And after she volunteered as a surgeon on the front lines of the Civil War, after the war was over and she was given the Medal of Freedom, her whole life's purpose became dress reform. Her feeling was what women wear on their bodies is more important than women getting the right to vote. She was adamant. She wrote a book about it. She was such an incredible, eccentric loudmouth. My favorite women are difficult women because they're shaking it up. She just didn't accept it. She didn't accept it. And she said, corsets are bad for your health. These skirts drag along the ground and they get germs. And she would be arrested. She was arrested innumerable times in her life for impersonating a man. And she was like, I'm not dressed as a man. I'm wearing my clothes. These are my clothes. She was just so adamant about it. And I just love her so much because anybody that says women being allowed to wear trousers is more important than the vote, back then, of course, the suffragists thought she was insane and they didn't want anything to do with her. What happened was they tried to take the Medal of Freedom away from her. I just love her because she was never in disguise. She's included in the book because she did shit she wasn't supposed to do. So she applies to the whole premise of the book because she dressed what other people said was like a man, and she did shit she wasn't supposed to do. But there's no disguise aspect in her stories. There's definitely a few people in the book that weren't necessarily disguised, but they still took on male garb or male names to do what they quote unquote weren't supposed to.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Got it.
But after they tried to strip her of her medal, she said, She said, I'm not giving it back. You're crazy.
Yeah.
And she wore it every day on her lapel until she died. She was buried with it. And then her great niece campaigned many, many years later, decades later, to the military, to the government. And they absolutely said 100% she deserves that Medal of Honor. I mean, she was a prisoner of war for like 4 months in a Confederate camp. She was on the front lines operating on soldiers. She was the only woman doing this. Mm-hmm. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. Again, I had never heard of Dr. Mary Edwards Walker before I wrote this book. Mm-hmm. So writing this book was like a gift. It was a gift to me. And I love hearing from readers who are moved or who relate, even though the stories are very different. I think that we can relate to these stories because, as I say in the introduction, women, we get knocked down, man. We get knocked down. We're still getting knocked down. They got rid of Roe versus Wade. We're living in a time where they got rid of abortion rights in this country. To me, it's insane. But what I know about us is we will never stop. We will always get up. We will always fight. And we are tenacious. And so that's what I hope people, when they read the book, and it's not just a book for women. I've had men reach out to me. It's sort of really rewarding when dudes reach out and they go, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm like, yes, shout it from the mountaintops.
Tracy, on a final note, you've been recently on strike with the rest of the Writers Guild. What advice would the women in this book maybe have for you?
Ooh, I like that question because I feel like I need a little boost right now. I think the women would love the way that I'm trying to handle it, which is hustling, pivoting, trying to use your gifts, being innovative in terms of how you're going to get through this. That's who all these women were. Mm-hmm. They were innovators and they didn't take it lying down. And so I can only hope that I would be making them proud, even though some days are better than others, in terms of feeling that everything's going to be okay and everything. But I do take strength from them because some of them faced some dire shit and they
faced it.
Yeah, they walked through it and they took care of themselves. They put themselves first. We're not supposed to do that as women. Socially, we're not taught that necessarily. It sounds a bit selfish, but I have lots of friends who've got kids and spouses and stuff. And it's this idea of that if women want to take care of themselves or put themselves first or take themselves on a vacation or do stuff without their kids, that it's selfish. I think it only makes you a better partner, a better parent. You know, the main relationship in your life is that unconditional love relationship with yourself. 100% has to be the foundation. Otherwise, your well won't be full in order to help feed other people.
That's awesome. That's a great final note. Tracy, thank you so much for telling us these amazing stories, introducing us to these incredible women. Do you want to tell everybody where they can get a copy of Let Me Be Frank, which is, again, the best title?
Thank you. So if you're in Canada, you can get the book at Chapters Indigo or your local bookstore. I know some people carry it, some people don't, but you can order it from, anybody can get it in because it is a HarperCollins book. In the States, it's everywhere. It's obviously on the Amazon. We love you to support your local bookshop. It's Barnes and Nobles. It's everywhere you get fine books. And if you love your local bookstore, go in there and say, hey, can you order in this book for me? And you should be able to get it in like 3 to 5 days. That's my experience.
Yep. That's the way to do it. Support local. I love it. Thank you again so much for talking to us, Tracy. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
I was so looking forward to talking to Tracy because I love hearing about all these badass women. But I didn't expect to learn so much from Tracy's story, how she failed at getting the TV writing gig, failed at selling this book as a TV show, and then led to creating this amazing book, and how the attitude of like no ego, curiosity led to this amazing flow of it just happening. I really liked hearing about how researching these women affected her and gave her strength during her tough time recently with the strike. And I love all those stories, but I particularly liked being reminded of the one about the queer women in the 1960s in Chicago having to flip their pants around so that the zippers faced in the back to avoid being arrested. As always, I want to know what struck you. So please send me a DM on Instagram, or better yet, leave me a raving review so that Jason Priestley sees it and I will love you forever. Hey, dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.